The truth is that Earth's biocapacity is not fixed. It is not fixed because it reflects the creative capacity of the human being. Almost none of what we consume in our living exists naturally on the Earth. With few exceptions, it has all been created by us, derived by means of man-created infrastructures, industries, science and technology, and energy use, and so on. Every item of our foods has been planted and cultivated and processed by human beings. Agriculture is not a natural process. It is a technological process. Also, in terms of creating ourselves resources for human living, we have barely scratched the surface of our potential. We have the technological capacity and the resources at hand to green the deserts, put agriculture afloat onto the ocean with floating bridges connecting the continents. The resources for this have not even been used yet, and they are available in such a measure that they can never be used up. Nor are we short of energy resources. Cosmic electric energy surrounds our planet, which we haven't even begun to develop, while it is as rich and unlimited as the cosmos itself. Of course, if we don't get out of our easy chair and develop the resources that we have the capacity to develop, then, and only then, will we find that our needs will one day be greater than our resources. This is also the heart of the Ice Age challenge. We are challenged by the approaching Ice Age to create brand new agricultural resources in places where the Ice Age cannot reach it, such as by placing it into the tropics, or into indoor facilities with totally controlled and optimized environments, built 50 stories high. In considering the technological capability that we have available right now, it can be safely said that the Earth will never be too small for humanity. No one needs to be killed to protect civilization. Nor is there a need for anyone on this planet to starve. Apart from stopping the burning of food as biofuels, the global food supply can be doubled with ease without adding new capacity by simply utilizing more advanced technologies and creating the infrastructures for them. Of the 1 billion people who are presently suffering from chronic hunger in the world, more than half live outside the cities, in the countryside, where they labor ill-equipped, and many of them in areas with terrible climates. This leaves us with a dramatic paradox, as the largest number of people dying from hunger in the world are farmers themselves. There are slightly under 1,500 million farmers in the world. Of these, only 13 million farmers have access to tractors. That's a tragedy, because mechanization not only increases their yields but also expands the size of land that can be cultivated. Most farmers in this advanced category have access to scientific seed selection, quality seed, fertilizer, chemicals, and irrigation. Scientific input also added to the progress. Where back in the 1900s a farmer in Europe was able to produce 100 quintals per harvest on his land, a modern farmer now produces 20,000 quintals on the same land. This adds up to a 200-fold increase in productivity. The next major category comprises roughly 800 million farmers. These farmers don't have access to mechanization, but they do have access to selected plant and animal species, fertilizer, and some irrigation. Out of these, 400 million farmers use oxen and horses to pull the plows, and so on. The farmers in this category farm roughly 5 hectares per farmer. The remaining 400 million farmers in this category use physical human labor exclusively. In other words, they pull the plow themselves. They typically farm about half an hectare each. Their typical yield is in the range between 100 and 500 quintals per hectare. The next lower category, which consists of the largest group of roughly 900 million farmers spread across the vast regions of Africa, Asia, and parts of South America, are laboring only with their body, and have no access to fertilizer, animal, or seed selection, nor irrigation. They generally produce a maximum of 10 quintals per harvest, which is roughly a tenth of the standard of farmers of the 1900s in Europe. What we see here is the sad outcome of the long-standing doctrine of empire to prevent human development. What the depopulation advocates do never acknowledges the fact that it is here, in the poorest countries, where human labor is critical for survival, where the population increase is the highest, while in contrast, The developed and industrialized countries are experiencing a population decrease. In other words, the very trends that the masters of empire cry over and advocate genocide for is the direct result of their own policy of preventing scientific and technological development in the world by all means at their disposal. One of the first priorities of the Ice Age Challenge, when it is seriously acknowledged, must be to break out of the stranglehold that poverty and underdevelopment imposes. This stranglehold imposes a horrendous waste of the human potential and of its productive capacity. When all this is considered, the breakout from poverty to advanced standards would likely increase the global food production tenfold, even up to 100-fold in some cases. It would provide a first-line defense against the coming ice age, since most of the impoverished farming is located in the more tropical areas that are not endangered by the ice age cooling. However, in order to get this accomplished, together with all the other building that is required in preparation for the coming ice age, humanity needs to achieve a complete breakout from empire. In the world of real economics, the achievement of physical production is the center of the focus. Production is the only means to meet the human need. The money supply is adjusted to facilitate whatever must be created for the well-being of society and the advance of civilization. Whatever money is applied to such a task gains its value from what is being produced. If nothing is being produced, all the money in the world has no value. If much is being produced, then the value of the currency is great. This direct relationship between money and production underlies the principle that was pioneered in the mid-1600s in the Bay Colony of Massachusetts. There, a scrip system was invented by the colonists, most of whom were farmers, to finance the construction of the Saugus Iron Works, with which the farming society created itself the means to advance its mechanization. The scrip became a form of money, and the money became valuable by the production it represented. On this principle, the pine tree shilling was coined in 1652 that made the colony independent from the money bags of empire. While all of this was soon outlawed by the King of England, the success of this principle of society self-sufficiency in credit led a half a century later to the formal declaration of the independence of the American colonies from empire. The independence movement was partly inspired by the credit society principle with which the Massachusetts colony had prospered while the principle was applied. For as long as the credit society principle was implemented in America or anywhere else in the world, the respective society prospered. But in all these cases too, as in the late 1600s in Massachusetts, the credit society principle was repeatedly overturned by various stooges of the masters of empire. Our continued survival on this planet, both right now and in the coming ice age, depends totally on our willingness to break away from the imperial stranglehold. If we fail ourselves along this line, the looting and the looting-related wars of empire, with their traditional long-standing commitment to universal genocide, will likely end human existence on this planet. It may end it before the Ice Age transition even begins. And we need a breakout now. Thus we need to pursue it with the same intensity with which we pursue our meeting of the Ice Age Challenge, because the two are linked. We should call the project before us the Ice Age Breakout. We need a big reason to take the big step that may be needed for casting empire into the trash bin. Thus the Ice Age Renaissance question must become the universal individual focus of concern. It needs to develop the leadership in society that redirects governments onto the platform of reality on which the human future is assured, and the door to war, genocide, poverty, and starvation will be closed and remain forever closed. On this platform of reality, the empire's optimum population trust condemns itself, which presently demands that 4.2 billion people be eliminated by the year 2050. It condemns itself because by its dogma, when the Ice Age glaciation begins and claims huge chunks of our agriculture, what remains of the world unaffected would be too minuscule for anyone to exist, except perhaps a small group of a few millions, like those that had made it through the last Ice Age, provided that empire hasn't poisoned those remaining lands by then with radioactive uranium dust. The needed breakout from this fate rests in the courts of society itself as individuals. Society needs to break out of its entrapment by empire, by the media of empire, and its news services, and its entertainment monopoly, and also its dictatorship over science, and so on. We need a breakout from monetarism, globalism, and from the global warming dogma that contains not a kernel of truth. It is well known in scientific circles that up to 97% of the greenhouse effect is caused by water vapor and only 3% by CO2, and that the man-made contribution is 3% of that at the very most. What society is fed contrary to that is a pabulum of lies that is served up continuously with the gospels of the day that fill the airwaves and newspapers. When society attempted to break out from the stranglehold of empire, as it saw the return of the Ice Age emerging on the horizon, the masters were in a quandary. They had to think up polite to change the focus, and they had to think it up quick. This problem was solved by misinterpreting the ice core data for humanity, which it latched onto and paraded as proof that global warming was on the horizon, and not the next glaciation cycle of the Pleistocene Ice Age. That we are presently in the hockey stick curve was invented that showed a massive increase in atmospheric CO2 since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. The curve represents CO2 concentrations contained in glacial records. The deception lies not in the measurements, which are evidently accurate, but in the interpretation thereof, which totally ignores the physical dynamics of ice accumulation. It is a known fact that when snow accumulates, the air becomes compressed, and that some of the compressed cold CO2 becomes dissolved in water vapor that escapes through cracks, or becomes concentrated in liquid water that forms pools or drains away. It is also known that this loss process increases with increasing pressure when the snow builds up above it, which compresses the lower snowflakes into firn, and then hoar, and so on, until a stage is reached when the firn and hoar become compacted into solid ice. This occurs at the 140-meter level, which just so happened to coincide with ice compacted from the beginning of the 1800s. It takes roughly 200 years of this loss volatile compacting process for snow to become solid ice. When ice core samples are drilled from this region in ice, they contain the progressively lower CO2 concentrations that resulted from the loss. What is indicated in the hockey stick curve is representative of a loss process, not a historic trend. Below the transition zone, all gases remain trapped in the ice, which means that no more losses occur, so that the curve remains flat from this point on. At the extremely deep level, past the 80,000-year mark, the ice becomes completely bubble-free, under immense pressure. All gases are diffused in liquids and ice crystals. But when the ice is drilled out, by which the pressure is removed, the gases expand and cause micro-fissures, which result in still lower the readings from ice in the deeper bubble-free zone. While all of this was known, and was extensively published, the inconvenient truth was simply disregarded. The Polish professor Zbigniew Jaworowski, who worked in the field of ice exploration for 50 years, called the CO2 distortion fraud the greatest scientific scandal of our time, especially considering that CO2 isn't a determining factor at all for our climate, as it accounts for only 3% of the global greenhouse effect, with the man-made portion being too minuscule to matter in any form or shape. The global CO2 concentration is not the violent greenhouse factor that it is made out to be. It is effective in absorbing and reflecting solar radiation in only 3 narrow bands at the low-intensity end of the solar radiation spectrum, which even there is masked by water vapor that provides the same effect. If one was to increase the CO2 concentration 20-fold, the increase would be too small to be noticeable. The entire CO2 hoopla has nothing to do with anything real. It is totally impossible for the Earth to be overheating as the result of any CO2 concentration, nor would it be possible for humanity at the present time to increase the atmospheric CO2 concentration as much as this would be desirable, and we would increase the CO2 if we could. Our biosphere is running at the near starvation level. The current 360 parts per million concentration is barely above the cutoff point of 200. Since we are running barely above the cutoff point, greenhouse operators have found that if they double the CO2 concentration in their facilities, a 50% increase in plant growth results.